The night was meant to be dazzling, a swirl of camera flashes, velvet ropes, and whispered names on every journalist's lips. The premiere of The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox had drawn Hollywood's brightest stars into one glittering space, each arrival punctuated by the chorus of photographers calling out for a smile or a pose. It was a night dripping with spectacle, and yet it would become remembered for a very different reason: the sight of Meghan Markle being stopped, firmly but unmistakably, at the red carpet's edge. Denied entry. Uninvited. The moment was as swift as it was brutal, a collision of expectation and humiliation in full view of the watching world. How did we get here? That's the question that must hang in the mind of every observer who has followed Meghan's turbulent journey from actress to duchess to global brand. Once a woman who could glide into any Hollywood space with the ease of belonging, she now stood facing a security guard who held the power to decide whether her presence was welcome. For Meghan, who had spent years carefully crafting an image of relevance, power, and glamour, this was more than an awkward social hiccup. This was symbolic. A door she expected to open had instead been slammed shut, and the echoes of that rejection reverberated far beyond one film premiere. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. To understand the gravity of this moment, picture the scene in detail. The carpet stretched under a canopy of lights, reporters rehearsed their lines, and celebrities strutted with the confidence of those who knew they belonged. Then came Meghan, her arrival choreographed as if she were still a star headlining her own event. Cameras snapped, some excited by the surprise of her presence, others puzzled. But as she approached, an unease rippled. The security team, rigid and uncompromising, stepped in. Their hands did not waver. Their message was clear: she was not on the list. And so, in that instant, a woman who had once been part of the Hollywood machine found herself treated like an outsider. What made it sting even deeper was the setting. This was not just any film premiere. The Amanda Knox story is one of scandal, redemption, and the relentless gaze of media judgment. Its very essence mirrored Meghan's own struggles. Both women had been framed by the press in ways that blurred truth and narrative. Both had fought to reclaim their voices. Was Meghan's attempt to appear at this premiere more than a social call? Was it a calculated move to align herself with a story that paralleled her own? If so, the rejection took on an almost theatrical irony. She had sought to stand as a symbol of resilience, but instead she became a headline for exclusion. The middle of the story shifts from spectacle to consequences. Within minutes of the red carpet standoff, whispers began. Paparazzi who had first raised their lenses in anticipation now leaned in closer, not for glamour shots but for evidence of discomfort. Clips began circulating online almost instantly, and hashtags sprouted across social media platforms. Some users mocked her with biting humor, others defended her, claiming she was unfairly targeted. But the damage was done. The narrative had escaped her control, as it so often does when a single moment crystallizes into a meme. For Meghan, the fury behind the scenes must have been volcanic. To be denied access was one thing. To have it broadcast and dissected in real time was another entirely. It was not just a matter of hurt pride, but of brand erosion. Every public rejection chips away at the aura of inevitability that celebrities and royals alike depend on. And here was Meghan, caught in a tableau that suggested her name no longer guaranteed her entry. What does that mean for someone who has built their identity on the power of visibility? The sting of rejection is sharpest when it is witnessed, and this was witnessed by the world. But let's pause and ask the uncomfortable question. Was she truly uninvited, or was this the narrative chosen for her? Hollywood is not a realm of accidents. Guest lists are curated, arrivals timed, and the choreography of celebrity appearances is meticulously planned. For Meghan to arrive without confirmed entry raises possibilities. Did she assume her status would be enough to secure entry? Was it an intentional gamble, hoping to generate headlines regardless of the outcome? Or was it a genuine misstep, a tragic miscalculation of her current standing in Hollywood's hierarchy? Each possibility carries its own implications, and none of them leave her entirely unscathed. This rejection also carries symbolic weight in her broader story. Ever since she and Harry stepped away from royal duties, Meghan has been navigating a complex web of identity. No longer fully royal, no longer just an actress, She exists in a liminal space where relevance must be constantly proved. Hollywood, once her home, has changed. The industry is not sentimental. It measures influence in streams, views, and headlines, and the currency of celebrity must be renewed constantly. In this case, the refusal at the carpet was more than a logistical hiccup. It was Hollywood itself delivering a verdict on her place within its ecosystem. And then there's the irony. Meghan has often spoken about feeling excluded, about doors being closed to her, about the pain of being judged unfairly. To be visibly excluded at an event centered around Amanda Knox, a woman defined for years by narratives imposed on her, feels like the universe scripting a cruel scene. Whether one views Meghan with sympathy or scorn, the symbolism is undeniable. She sought entry into a space of storytelling about injustice, only to be cast in a fresh narrative of her own humiliation. The end of the introduction circles back to the core of this exposé. This is not just about a red carpet incident. It is about the fragility of image, the fickle nature of public acceptance, and the brutal truth that status is only as strong as the doors it can open. Meghan's fury in that moment was not merely about being told no. It was about what no represented. The possibility that she no longer commands automatic respect, that her relevance is contested, that the narrative is slipping out of her control. And for a woman who has built her life on rewriting the script others wrote for her, this public denial was nothing short of catastrophic. So we are left with questions that will guide the rest of this story. Was Meghan's rejection an isolated embarrassment or a symptom of something much larger? What does it reveal about her position in Hollywood, her influence in media, and her ongoing struggle for validation? And most importantly, what happens when someone who has always fought to stay in the spotlight finds the light no longer shining on her? The evening of the premiere had been billed as one of the biggest cultural events of the season. The twisted tale of Amanda Knox was no ordinary release. It was a film wrapped in controversy, intrigue, and the promise of reigniting debates about justice, media power, and personal redemption. The venue was dressed accordingly. Velvet ropes cordoning off the red carpet, spotlights bathing the entrance in a glow so blinding it seemed unreal, and reporters huddled shoulder to shoulder, each waiting for that one quote or image that could define the night. From the moment the first star arrived, it was clear this was not just cinema, it was spectacle. Celebrities flowed in like a parade, each arrival scripted in its own way. Limousines crept up, doors opened with precision, and familiar faces stepped out, basking in the coordinated symphony of flashbulbs and applause. The chatter of journalists rose into a rhythmic chant of names, directors, producers, actors, all of them connected to the narrative being launched on screen. There was a sense of order, of ritual, in the way the night unfolded. Each person belonged, each person had a role, and the red carpet was their stage. The glamour was intoxicating, not just for those who walked it, but for the crowd pressed against the barriers, craning their necks for a glimpse of stardust. In the midst of this tightly curated display, the presence of the Amanda Knox story loomed like a shadow. Everyone knew what the film represented. A tale of media distortion, wrongful accusation, and a woman forced to live under the harsh glare of global judgment. It was a film that dared to confront uncomfortable truths about perception versus reality. That weight gave the night an edge. It wasn't just a glamorous occasion. It was a gathering framed by controversy. To be part of it was to be associated with the conversation. To stand on that carpet was to say something, even if silently, about the value of truth and redemption in the face of media storms. Every detail of the premiere reinforced that atmosphere. The decor was sleek, minimalist, yet unmistakably expensive. Crisp white backdrops bore the film's title in bold black letters, and the sponsors' logos gleamed at the edges. The air was filled with the scent of perfume mingling with freshly cut flowers placed strategically near the entrance. The organizers had thought of everything. The choreography of the evening was seamless, like a performance within a performance. It was designed to remind Hollywood and the watching public that cinema still had the power to provoke, to unsettle, and to mesmerize. The guests reflected that ambition. A-list actors brushed shoulders with producers whose names were less known, but whose power was immense. Influencers, journalists, and critics mingled in carefully allocated spaces, their access dictated by invisible hierarchies of relevance. You could sense the stakes in the way people carried themselves. Every smile measured, every gesture calculated, every outfit chosen for maximum impact. No one arrived by accident. Each appearance was part of a larger tapestry, a statement of belonging. That was the silent contract of the red carpet. Only those who had been chosen, invited, or strategically aligned were permitted to cross into the glow. The audience beyond the ropes played its own role. Fans held up signs, phones angled high to capture even the briefest glimpse of their idols. Their cheers rose and fell like waves, timed to the sight of recognizable faces. The red carpet was not just a walkway. It was an arena, a proving ground where fame was both celebrated and contested. The crowd knew it. The media knew it. And every celebrity stepping out of their cars knew it too. The tension was as electric as it was glamorous, an invisible current charging every interaction. Against this backdrop, the mood carried an extra sense of gravitas because of Amanda Knox herself. Even if she wasn't present in person, her story infused the event. The attendees were not only celebrating a film, but aligning themselves with a cultural narrative that divided opinion. Was Knox a victim, a survivor, or a symbol of something more complicated? The questions hung in the air as heavily as the perfume. Being at the premiere meant standing in that space of ambiguity, of conflict, of unresolved truths. It was an invitation not only to entertainment, but to controversy. And in Hollywood, that can often matter more. The industry thrives on symbolism, and this premiere was drenched in it. The lighting, the music, the careful pacing of arrivals, it all worked to create the impression of a community bound by shared purpose. But beneath the glamour, there was an unspoken reality. Access was controlled, curated, and guarded. Security teams in dark suits moved discreetly but firmly, checking names against lists, whispering into earpieces, ensuring that the exclusivity of the evening was maintained at all costs. No matter how powerful or famous someone was, if they were not on that list, the velvet rope remained a barrier, not a gateway. That was the iron law of Hollywood events, a law that would soon collide with Meghan Markle's expectations. From a distance, the night seemed perfect. The flashbulbs reflected like stars across the glossy black cars. The laughter of celebrities echoed, and the buzz of anticipation wrapped itself around the entire venue. But the perfection was brittle, like glass waiting for a crack. Beneath the surface calm, the possibility of disruption lingered. That's the thing about red carpet premieres. They are as fragile as they are glamorous. One unexpected arrival, one tense exchange, one denial at the entrance can unravel the illusion of order and expose the raw dynamics of power beneath the glamour. The twisted tale of Amanda Knox premiere was about to experience precisely that, and the stage was already set for drama that no film could have scripted better. She arrived with the timing of someone who understood the mechanics of spectacle. Meghan Markle's car rolled slowly toward the barricades, its tinted windows reflecting the flashes already aimed in its direction. The crowd, used to seeing stars step out one after another, sensed something unusual and shifted their focus. There's a particular murmur that rises when anticipation mixes with uncertainty, and in that moment, the red carpet seemed to hold its breath. When the door opened and Meghan emerged, the whispers turned into a swell of recognition and surprise. She had chosen her moment carefully, stepping out into the lights not as a bystander, but as if she were part of the official procession. Her appearance was striking, as it always had been. Every detail of her outfit seemed calibrated to make a statement. The dress she wore was elegant but unmistakably bold, the kind that would land on the front page of fashion blogs by morning. Her hair and makeup were polished with precision, hinting at the hours of preparation that had gone into this single arrival. Meghan did not walk toward the carpet tentatively. She strode with the confidence of someone who believed she belonged, her heels clicking against the pavement in rhythm with the chance of paparazzi calling her name. Cameras snapped furiously, eager to capture what was clearly about to be one of the night's defining moments. What struck the onlookers most was how much Meghan carried herself as though this were her stage. She waved, she posed subtly, she tilted her chin toward the cameras in a way that ensured every angle was captured. To the uninformed, it would have seemed as though she were one of the invited stars, scheduled and expected. And perhaps that was part of the illusion she sought to create. After all, Meghan had long understood the importance of controlling the narrative, of projecting an image that leaves no room for doubt. But beneath the flashes and the murmurs, there lingered a tension that only a few could see. Her name was not on the official guest list. To the seasoned observers, publicists, assistants, and security personnel, the misalignment was obvious. While the crowd cheered and the cameras fired, the expressions of those tasked with enforcing order grew taut. They watched her walk toward the roped-off entrance, their eyes flicking between their lists and her advancing figure. It was as if two realities were colliding: the reality of her past fame and global recognition, and the reality of Hollywood protocol where access is dictated not by past glories, but by present invitations. Still, Meghan pressed forward, undeterred. She carried herself with the poise of someone who believed her presence could not be questioned. After all, she was no ordinary celebrity. She was a former royal, a woman who had once walked beside the future King of England. She was the subject of global fascination, her name enough to draw headlines in any corner of the world. To her, walking onto the carpet without hesitation was not arrogance, but inevitability. Surely, she thought, the gates would open. Surely, the cameras would continue to flash, the fans would continue to scream, and the night would become another chapter in her story of reinvention. And for a brief moment, it seemed to work. The energy of her arrival shifted the entire mood of the event. Fans craned their necks, shouting her name as if she were the star they had been waiting for all evening. Journalists whispered furiously into their microphones, suddenly reworking their scripts to account for this unexpected arrival. Photographers jostled to capture the perfect frame, Meghan standing against the backdrop of a film premiere that was never supposed to feature her. The buzz was undeniable. She had managed to insert herself into the story, if only for those few minutes. But glamour has limits. As Meghan drew closer to the entrance, where the lights were brighter and the security tighter, the tension became impossible to ignore. The expressions of the staff changed from polite neutrality to quiet alertness. They moved slightly, forming a subtle but noticeable barrier between her and the red carpet proper. The path that had opened so effortlessly for other guests now felt narrower, obstructed. It was the first visible sign that this story would not follow the script Meghan had imagined. Still, she didn't break stride. With a small smile, she approached the point of entry as if expecting the velvet rope to part. There was no falter in her step, no hesitation in her eyes. It was as though she believed the strength of her persona, her history, and her fame could override any logistical detail. For Meghan, this was not just an entrance. It was a reclamation of Hollywood space, a reminder that she still commanded attention. Her confidence, however, was built on fragile ground. The staff at the entrance were not moved by the cheers of fans or the frenzy of the press. They were professionals, bound not by spectacle but by protocol. Their job was to guard access, to ensure that only those whose names were etched into the list crossed that threshold. Meghan's approach brought them to the edge of confrontation, the quiet collision of expectation and authority. This was the moment when her poised arrival transformed into a silent standoff. On one side, Meghan, framed by flashbulbs, exuding the composure of someone who had spent her life navigating stages both literal and metaphorical. On the other, a row of security officers holding clipboards and earpieces, armed not with celebrity, but with authority. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that makes even the casual bystander sense something about to break. And yet, Meghan's demeanor remained composed. She adjusted her dress slightly, offered the faintest of smiles to a camera aimed just over the guard's shoulder, and prepared to step into the space she believed was rightfully hers. But as she did, the first words of refusal were spoken, not loudly, not rudely, but firmly enough to cut through the noise. It was the beginning of the unraveling, the crack in the illusion that her arrival had so carefully constructed. That, however, is a story for the next chapter. For now, it is enough to understand the weight of her arrival, the confidence she projected, and the tension it created. Meghan had stepped into the night believing it was hers to claim. But the stage she sought to command was not waiting for her, and the rules of Hollywood exclusivity were about to remind her of that in the most humiliating way possible. The moment of confrontation unfolded not with a dramatic shout or public scuffle, but with the quiet firmness that often proves most devastating. Meghan had reached the checkpoint where the red carpet begins in earnest, the place where organizers check credentials and confirm identities before anyone crosses under the glow of spotlights. She expected the velvet rope to be pulled aside. Instead, the first security officer leaned in slightly, his voice low but unmistakably clear. Her name was not on the list. For a fraction of a second, Meghan's face betrayed nothing. Her years of training as an actress and her experience as a royal consort had taught her how to maintain composure under scrutiny. Cameras continued to flash, fans continued to call her name, and she managed a small smile as though nothing were amiss. But those closest to the exchange saw the shift. The slight tightening of her jaw, the quick glance to the clipboard, the faint flicker of disbelief in her eyes. It was the kind of reaction that signaled she was not prepared for what she was hearing. The guard, however, did not waver. He repeated himself, this time more firmly. He gestured toward the list, showed the column of names, and pointed out the absence of hers. Meghan leaned forward as if to examine the paper, though it was more a gesture of performance than necessity. She had heard him the first time. What she sought was not clarification, but concession. She wanted him to recognize her, to understand who she was, to bend the rule for her as so many others had done in the past. But Hollywood security at such events is not known for improvisation. They follow instructions with the rigidity of soldiers, because any deviation could unravel the carefully curated exclusivity of the evening. The press sensed the tension almost immediately. Photographers trained their lenses on the small cluster of people at the entrance, hoping to capture a moment of drama. Journalists whispered to each other, trying to confirm whether what they were seeing was real. To the public eye, the scene was still ambiguous. Meghan appeared to be speaking casually with staff, perhaps clarifying a detail. But those who knew the language of these moments understood the truth. She was being told no. She was being denied, in real time, under the blinding glare of cameras and the watching crowd. For Meghan, fury bubbled just beneath the surface. To be told she was not allowed entry was not simply about access to a film premiere. It was about status, about perception, about power. She had built her life on the assumption that doors opened at her approach, that her presence was enough to command inclusion. Now, with every second that passed, she was being forced into a narrative of rejection. And in the world of celebrity, perception is reality. To be seen as excluded is often worse than being excluded itself. She tried again, this time more forcefully, her voice audible enough that fragments drifted toward the microphones. There must be a mistake, she said, gesturing toward the guards. I was told. But her words trailed off, cut short by the firmness of the staff who repeated that without confirmation on the list, she could not be admitted. Their tone was professional, their posture unwavering. They had dealt with uninvited arrivals before, though rarely of this magnitude. Still, procedure was procedure, and Meghan's attempts at persuasion only hardened their resolve. Around her, the atmosphere shifted. The fans who had been screaming her name moments earlier grew quieter, confused by the unexpected delay. Some muttered to each other, trying to guess what was happening. Others raised their phones higher, hoping to record a viral moment. The red carpet thrives on spectacle, and now Meghan was at the center of one she could not control. She was no longer just an arrival. She was a disruption, a story unfolding live. What made the situation more excruciating was how public it became in such a short time. In the age of social media, nothing remains private for long, especially not at a premiere surrounded by journalists and influencers. Within minutes, tweets began to appear. Did Meghan Markle just get denied at the Knox premiere? Security stopping Meghan? This is wild. The narrative began to spiral before she had even left the entrance. Each second she remained there, arguing quietly with the guards, cemented the impression of exclusion. And yet, she did not leave immediately. Meghan lingered, her pride refusing to allow her a retreat that could be interpreted as defeat. She adjusted her dress, smiled faintly at the cameras, and tried to give the impression that she was simply waiting for clarification. But the truth was undeniable. She was stalling, hoping for someone with authority to intervene, to override the guards and usher her inside. That intervention never came. No publicist, no organizer, no ally appeared to smooth the path. She was alone, and in that loneliness, the humiliation grew sharper. It is one thing to be rejected in private, quite another to be rejected before the lenses of hundreds of cameras. Meghan understood this viscerally. Each click of the shutters, each beam of the spotlight, was documenting not her triumph, but her denial. And the irony was cruel. The event she had chosen to appear at, a film about media distortion and injustice, was now providing the stage for her own moment of public judgment. The breaking point came when security stopped attempting to explain. They shifted their posture from negotiation to finality, their bodies subtly forming a wall that signaled the conversation was over. Meghan's smile faltered then, just for a second, a crack in the facade that revealed the frustration boiling underneath. She knew the cameras would capture that too, and so she quickly replaced it with a neutral expression, tilting her head toward the crowd as if acknowledging the fans rather than conceding to rejection. But those closest could see it. The sharp inhale, the stiffening shoulders, the refusal in her eyes. At last, she had no choice but to step back. The rope did not move, the guards did not shift, and the path onto the carpet remained firmly closed. She turned slightly, still maintaining the illusion of composure, and began to retreat toward her car. The crowd erupted again, some cheering her name in sympathy, others shouting in confusion. The cameras continued to fire, capturing every step of her exit. What was meant to be an entrance of triumph had become an exit of defeat. The fury she carried with her into the night could not be hidden. To be denied entry in such a setting was more than an inconvenience. It was a public statement of her position in the Hollywood hierarchy. Meghan had expected the night to be a stage for her reinvention, a reminder of her relevance. Instead, it had exposed her vulnerability, her lack of access, and the fragility of her standing. The moment would haunt her, replayed endlessly in headlines, dissected on talk shows, and immortalized in memes. The word, uninvited, carries a sting that few in the world of fame can bear. It is not just a logistical detail. It is a label, one that lingers and spreads faster than any image. When Meghan Markle was refused entry at the Knox premiere, the whispers quickly coalesced into that single word, uninvited. It appeared first in murmurs between journalists clustered along the barricades, then on social media captions attached to blurry videos, and finally in headlines crafted to maximize humiliation. That label became the lens through which the entire incident was interpreted, reshaping what could have been a small misunderstanding into a defining moment of rejection. To understand why the word struck so deeply, you have to consider Meghan's relationship with public perception. From the very beginning of her career, she fought to move from the margins into the spotlight, working tirelessly to craft the image of someone who belonged. As an actress, she had once been the invited guest at industry events, welcomed onto carpets as part of the fabric of Hollywood. Later, as a duchess, her presence commanded not only access but deference. To be uninvited now was more than just an oversight. It was a reversal of the trajectory she had worked her entire life to build. It suggested exclusion, irrelevance, and worst of all, rejection by the very culture she had once conquered. The speed with which the word spread was staggering. Social media thrives on simplicity, and the term uninvited distilled the event into a single, devastating narrative. On Twitter, users turned it into a trending hashtag within the hour. On Instagram, clips of her being stopped at the rope were paired with captions like, "When you're not on the list," or "uninvited guest energy." TikTok creators layered the footage with music and memes, turning her frustration into entertainment. Each repost and remix amplified the sting, until the label was no longer just a description, but a brand of humiliation attached to her name. What made the situation even more complicated was the ambiguity. Was she truly uninvited, or was there a miscommunication, a bureaucratic oversight, or even a deliberate exclusion? The lack of clarity fed speculation, and speculation is the oxygen of scandal. Some argued that Meghan might have assumed her status guaranteed her entry, showing up without formal confirmation. Others claimed she had been intentionally left out by organizers who did not want the distraction of her presence overshadowing the premiere. A few even suggested it was a calculated move on her part, that she had arrived without an invitation precisely to provoke a moment that would dominate the headlines. In the absence of facts, the word uninvited became both accusation and judgment, leaving her with little room to control the narrative. This is the brutal power of labels in celebrity culture. To be uninvited is to be diminished, to be cast as someone on the outside looking in. It paints the image of desperation, of wanting access but being denied. And for Meghan, who has so often positioned herself as a woman in control of her destiny, the contrast was unbearable. The press seized on it with glee, weaving it into headlines that practically dripped with schadenfreude. Meghan Markle denied at premiere. Uninvited and unwelcome. Red carpet snub. Meghan stopped cold without an invite. The repetition of the word across platforms etched it into public consciousness, ensuring it would not be forgotten easily. The human toll of that label must not be overlooked. Meghan has long spoken about her struggles with feeling excluded, marginalized, and judged. To have the world watch her literally barred from entry while the term uninvited flashed across screens was more than public embarrassment. It was a reopening of old wounds. The humiliation was not private, it was collective, a spectacle consumed by millions. To be excluded is painful, but to be excluded publicly, with the entire world watching, is a humiliation few can imagine enduring. At the same time, the label uninvited resonated with broader cultural dynamics. Hollywood is an ecosystem obsessed with access, where being on the list is as much about power as it is about logistics. The right people are always invited, and the wrong people are not. To be uninvited is to be declared irrelevant, or worse, unwanted. In Meghan's case, it suggested that her celebrity currency had devalued, that the industry she once left behind as she entered royalty was no longer eager to welcome her back. The symbolism was devastating. She was caught between two worlds, no longer fully royal and not fully Hollywood either, and the velvet rope made that limbo painfully visible. The irony was also brutal. Meghan had come to symbolize for many a woman who challenged exclusion, who spoke openly about being denied opportunities because of her background, her race, her unwillingness to conform. Yet here she was, excluded again, this time not by an invisible system, but by a very visible rope. The optics could not be ignored. Critics pointed to the incident as proof of her fall from grace, while supporters decried it as another example of her being unfairly targeted. In either case, the word uninvited hung over it all, turning the premiere into a parable about belonging and rejection. There is another layer to consider. In Hollywood, where image is everything, the perception of being uninvited can have ripple effects beyond a single event. It raises questions about alliances, about relationships with power players, about future opportunities. If she could be denied at such a high-profile premiere, what did that signal about her access elsewhere? Would other organizers think twice about including her, wary of the distraction her presence might bring? Would studios hesitate, fearing that her brand carried more controversy than clout? These are the quiet calculations made behind closed doors, and the incident at the premiere may have influenced them in ways unseen. For Meghan, the fury behind the label was not just about one night. It was about the erosion of her carefully cultivated image. Every article that described her as uninvited chipped away at the perception of her as someone who belonged. Each meme that mocked her reinforced the idea that she was no longer in control of her narrative. And in the end, it was that loss of control that mattered most. For a woman who had built her identity on telling her story on her terms, being reduced to a single humiliating word was intolerable. The label of uninvited also lingered because of its simplicity. It required no context, no explanation, no nuance. It could be repeated endlessly, applied to photos, turned into hashtags, embedded into headlines, and understood instantly by anyone who saw it. In an age of fleeting attention spans, the word was devastatingly effective. Meghan could issue clarifications, her team could offer explanations, but the word remained. Uninvited. That was the story, and once it was etched into the public imagination, it became almost impossible to erase. Thus, what might have been a small stumble at the gates of a film premiere transformed into a narrative earthquake. Meghan Markle, uninvited. The phrase echoed not only in the media but in the minds of those who witnessed it, becoming shorthand for a broader question. Does she still belong in the spaces she once occupied so easily? The answer, at least on that night, was a resounding no. It started with murmurs, then whispers, and within minutes it became a wildfire. The moment Meghan Markle was halted at the velvet rope, the media frenzy ignited in ways no one could have fully anticipated. Red carpet events are designed to generate headlines, but not this kind. This was no glowing fashion review or celebrity quote about a film premiere. This was raw drama, unfolding in real time, captured on dozens of smartphones and broadcast across countless platforms before Meghan even had the chance to leave the scene. The first sparks came from the paparazzi positioned at the entrance. Their cameras were always trained to capture moments of perfection, but in this instance, they had stumbled upon something more valuable: imperfection. They snapped relentlessly, not just the polished images of Meghan posing, but the sharp exchanges between her and the guards, the stiff body language that betrayed her frustration the moment her smile faltered. These photographs carried more weight than any gown or jewel she might have worn. They told a story of exclusion, of a celebrity denied access, and those images traveled faster than any official press release. Journalists on the carpet did not hesitate to report what they saw. Within half an hour, gossip sites posted short, tantalizing headlines. Drama at the Amanda Knox premiere. Was Meghan Markle denied entry? That was all it took to set the rumor mill in motion. Speculation filled in the gaps where facts were scarce, and in the digital age, speculation often eclipses truth. Social media users who had no connection to the event began posting their interpretations, stitching together shaky footage with biting commentary. The frenzy fed itself, each new post amplifying the reach of the story. On Twitter, the story trended within the hour. Hashtags like #MeghanSnubbed, #Uninvited, and #RedCarpetDrama surged across the platform. Users divided quickly into camps: those who mocked her with memes and jokes, and those who defended her, insisting she was once again the target of unfair treatment. The mocking posts gained traction quickly, as humor often does, with images of velvet ropes paired with captions like, "Not today, Meghan," or clips of bouncers turning away guests at nightclubs. But the defenders were equally vocal, pointing out the cruelty of celebrating someone's public humiliation. The debate turned fierce, and soon Meghan's rejection was no longer just about her, but about broader conversations of privilege, entitlement, and exclusion. Instagram amplified the spectacle with even more visual force. Clips of Meghan's halted approach, paired with dramatic music and slow-motion effects, spread across reels and stories. Fashion accounts dissected her outfit, noting how perfectly styled she had been for a carpet she never got to walk. Celebrity gossip pages capitalized on the moment, turning it into a carousel of images labeled "the snub heard round Hollywood." Some went further, comparing her exclusion to other infamous celebrity red carpet dramas, placing Meghan firmly within a narrative of fallen stars and public humiliations. TikTok, however, was where the frenzy reached its most chaotic peak. Users recreated the moment with skits, some dressing up in gowns and pretending to be stopped at a rope, others dubbing over the video with imagined conversations between Meghan and security. One viral edit even spliced together Meghan's past interviews about exclusion with the footage of her being turned away, creating a brutal side-by-side commentary on her recurring narrative of rejection. The platform thrives on irony, and Meghan's misfortune became fuel for thousands of creative and often merciless reinterpretations. What made the media frenzy particularly brutal was how quickly it overshadowed the premiere itself. The twisted tale of Amanda Knox had been carefully orchestrated as a provocative cultural event, with its own stars and controversies. Yet by the next morning, the film's debut was a footnote. The story dominating headlines was not about Amanda Knox, but about Meghan Markle. For organizers, this was both a blessing and a curse. The premiere gained more attention than they could have imagined, but for reasons entirely outside their control. For Meghan, it was a nightmare. She had not been included in the event, yet she had become its central story. The mainstream press seized on the moment with precision. Established outlets ran with headlines that ranged from sympathetic to scathing. Some framed it as an unfortunate misunderstanding. Meghan Markle experiences awkward moment at premiere. Others leaned into the harsher interpretation. Meghan Markle denied entry, not on the list. Opinion columns began to appear, each offering analysis of what the incident symbolized. Some painted it as a metaphor for Meghan's fractured relationship with both Hollywood and royalty. Others suggested it revealed entitlement, the assumption that she could appear anywhere without an invitation. The media frenzy was not just about what happened, but about what it meant, and that ambiguity allowed the story to stretch far beyond the actual event. Television networks quickly joined in. Entertainment shows replayed the footage with dramatic commentary, often accompanied by roundtable discussions about Meghan's fall from grace. Morning talk shows analyzed it as though it were a political scandal, asking guests what it revealed about her character and her reputation. News anchors introduced the story with barely concealed smirks, aware that audiences tuned in not for sober analysis, but for the deliciousness of celebrity missteps. Meghan had become, once again, the subject of a global conversation she could not control. At the center of the frenzy was the duality of perception. To some, she was a victim of an unnecessary snub, a woman unfairly targeted by an industry eager to humble her. To others, she was an interloper, someone who had overstepped, seeking relevance by inserting herself into an event where she had no place. Both narratives gained traction, each feeding a different audience, and together they ensured that the story reached maximum saturation. The frenzy was not about truth, but about resonance, and Meghan's denial resonated because it touched on themes larger than her: belonging, access, power, and rejection. What made the frenzy inescapable for Meghan was its permanence. In the past, a red carpet incident might have been forgotten after a few days. But in the digital age, every clip, every meme, every headline becomes part of an endless archive. Search engines would forever pair her name with this incident, and each retelling would sharpen the sting. The frenzy had done its work. It had taken a single humiliating moment and transformed it into a cultural touchstone, a story that would be remembered not for its nuance, but for its spectacle. And behind it all, Meghan's silence became its own form of fuel. As the story spread, she said nothing publicly, at least not immediately. Her refusal to comment left a vacuum, and in that vacuum, speculation thrived. Was she furious? Was she humiliated? Was she plotting a response? The lack of clarity gave the media permission to invent answers, and they did so eagerly. Every article ended with a question, every pundit offered a theory, and the frenzy continued unabated. Silence, in moments like this, is never neutral. It becomes part of the story. In the end, the media frenzy around Meghan's denial at the Amanda Knox premiere was not just about the event itself. It was about the way modern culture consumes scandal, about the hunger for narratives of downfall, and about the brutality of being caught in the digital crossfire. Meghan had arrived expecting to walk a carpet, to remind Hollywood of her relevance. Instead, she had become the subject of a frenzy that reminded her, and the world, just how quickly reputations can be reshaped in the age of instant media. Before Meghan Markle ever stepped into the gilded halls of royal palaces, before her name was permanently entangled with that of the British monarchy, she was simply another working actress in Hollywood. Her past in the industry was not one of instant stardom or effortless ascension. It was a slow climb, one built on bit parts, commercials, and the grueling audition circuit that defines the lives of most actors. To understand why her attempted arrival at the Amanda Knox premiere carried so much symbolic weight, one must first revisit Meghan's Hollywood past, a past that explains both her desire for validation and her complex relationship with the industry that now seemed to reject her. She was not born into the industry. Meghan's beginnings were humble, her first steps into entertainment shaped by persistence rather than privilege. Early on, she took whatever roles she could get. Game shows, small television appearances, and minor film parts formed the foundation of her career. The glamour of Hollywood was still distant, but she learned quickly how the game was played. Appearances mattered, connections mattered even more, and access was everything. She moved through casting calls with determination, studying not just how to perform, but how to present herself in a world that was as much about perception as talent. Her big break came, of course, with Suits. The legal drama transformed her from a struggling actress into a recognizable face, particularly within niche audiences who adored the show's sharp dialogue and stylish portrayal of corporate law. For years, Meghan inhabited the role of Rachel Zane with confidence and poise. On screen, she was polished and intelligent, embodying a character who fought for credibility in a male-dominated environment. Off-screen, She cultivated an image of relatability mixed with elegance, balancing her rising fame with a carefully curated public persona. For the first time, she was not clawing for roles. She was being chosen. Hollywood, in its own way, had finally extended its invitation. But even at the height of her suit's fame, Meghan's relationship with Hollywood was never without friction. She was not a leading actress in blockbuster films, nor was she part of the A-list circle that dominated the biggest events. Her fame was real, but it was fragile. She was celebrated within a certain sphere, but still on the periphery of Hollywood's highest tier. That limitation mattered deeply, because in Hollywood, proximity to power is often as important as talent itself. Meghan knew that, and she worked to bridge the gap by cultivating her brand beyond acting. She became a lifestyle blogger, wrote about wellness and identity, and engaged in activism. She was laying the groundwork for something bigger, for a life that would not depend solely on casting directors or studio heads. And then, her life changed in a way no Hollywood script could have predicted. The relationship with Prince Harry catapulted her out of the industry and into a different kind of spotlight altogether. Suddenly, Meghan was not just an actress on a moderately popular show. She was a royal fiancée, then a duchess, her name spoken alongside centuries of tradition and monarchy. Hollywood, in comparison, seemed small, almost provincial. For a time, Meghan no longer needed Hollywood. She had transcended it, moved into a realm where her presence alone commanded more attention than any red carpet ever could. Yet, as history showed, that transcendence came with costs. Leaving the royal family stripped Meghan and Harry of much of their formal power, and they sought to rebuild their identities in the only world that seemed ready to absorb them again, Hollywood. But Hollywood is not easily forgiving. It remembers who was once part of its ecosystem and who abandoned it. Meghan returned not as an actress, but as a brand, one half of a royal couple attempting to carve out a place in American media. The Netflix and Spotify deals symbolized this attempt, promising a future where she and Harry would produce, influence, and shape culture rather than simply participate in it. But those projects brought their own difficulties. The Spotify deal ended prematurely, with reports of disappointment over content delivery. The Netflix projects, while announced with fanfare, struggled to make the kind of impact the streaming giant had hoped for. Each misstep reminded Hollywood insiders that Meghan and Harry's brand, though explosive at first, might not have the staying power required in an industry that demands constant relevance. And in Hollywood, relevance is everything. To slip even slightly is to risk being forgotten, replaced by the next wave of stars or influencers. That is why Meghan's attempted arrival at the Amanda Knox premiere resonated so sharply. It was not just about a door being closed. It was about her complicated relationship with an industry that once gave her a place but never fully embraced her as one of its own. She had left Hollywood on her own terms, stepping into royalty, but she returned seeking validation. And Hollywood, true to its nature, offered no sentimentality. It judged her not by her past triumphs, but by her present relevance. At that moment on the carpet, being stopped at the entrance was not just about protocol. It was a reminder that in Hollywood's eyes, she was no longer indispensable. There is also the matter of how Meghan's Hollywood past contrasts with her present reality. On Suits, she was part of a cast ensemble that thrived on chemistry and collaboration. In the royal family, she was part of an institution larger than herself, bound by rules and traditions. But in her post-royal life, she has often seemed to walk alone, attempting to stand as a figure of influence without the networks that traditionally sustain Hollywood power. The Amanda Knox premiere exposed that isolation. There was no studio executive rushing to her defense, no publicist smoothing the way, no co-stars shielding her. She was on her own, and Hollywood treated her as such. Her past also reveals why the humiliation cut so deeply. Meghan had worked tirelessly to rise above rejection in her early career, to fight for a place where she belonged. To face rejection now, in so public and symbolic a manner, must have felt like a cruel regression, as though the years of progress had been undone in a single evening. It was not just about being stopped at a rope. It was about the ghost of every casting director who once told her no, every role she had lost, every moment she felt excluded in her climb. The past and present collided, and the result was devastating. And yet, there is another irony. Meghan's Hollywood past also prepared her for this kind of scrutiny. She knew how narratives were spun, how humiliation could be repackaged into resilience, how exclusion could be reframed as independence. It is possible that, even as she simmered with fury, she was already calculating how to turn this moment into part of her story. After all, Hollywood thrives not only on triumphs, but on comebacks. And Meghan has always positioned herself as someone who refuses to be silenced, who turns rejection into defiance. Her past suggests that even in humiliation, she would look for the seeds of reinvention. Still, the shadow of her Hollywood past looms. It is a reminder that she was once part of the system, but never entirely secure within it. That past explains why her attempted re-entry feels fraught with tension, why every rejection carries the weight of unfinished business. For Meghan, Hollywood is not just an industry. It is the stage where she first fought for recognition, where she tasted both triumph and exclusion, and where she now seeks validation once again. The Amanda Knox premiere was not merely an event. It was a mirror, reflecting back to her the precariousness of her place in a world she thought she had conquered long ago. The Amanda Knox premiere was more than a film event. It was a cultural flashpoint, one that resonated with themes of injustice, media manipulation, and the fight for identity. That is why Meghan Markle's attempted appearance at this particular premiere carried such weight. It was not random. The parallels between Amanda Knox's story and Meghan's own struggles were striking, and many wondered if her presence was meant to align her narrative with Knox's. A way of drawing unspoken comparisons between two women cast as villains by the press and forced to reclaim their voices. But when she was stopped at the door, the symbolism became even sharper. Instead of being seen as a sister in resilience, Meghan became the outsider, uninvited to a story that mirrored her own. Amanda Knox's life has been defined by controversy and public judgment. Wrongly convicted in Italy for the murder of her roommate, she endured years of imprisonment and the kind of media scrutiny few could survive. She was painted alternately as a manipulative femme fatale and as an innocent caught in a nightmare, her humanity obscured by sensational headlines. The film premiering that night sought to retell her story, to explore the complexity behind the media caricature, and to humanize a woman long treated as a tabloid figure. For Meghan, the parallels must have been irresistible. She too has been portrayed as manipulative, ambitious, and untrustworthy, her every move dissected by a press eager for scandal. She too has fought to control her narrative, to be seen as more than the character others wrote for her. By appearing at the premiere, Meghan may have hoped to insert herself into that cultural conversation, to suggest, without saying a word, that her story belonged in the same category. Just as Amanda had been vilified and later reinterpreted, so too could Meghan present herself as misunderstood, unfairly maligned, and deserving of empathy. The symbolism of walking that carpet would have been powerful. It would have been a visual declaration that she was part of a lineage of women wronged by media narratives, now reclaiming their truth. But Hollywood, in its cold calculation, denied her that moment, and in doing so, it transformed the intended symbolism into something crueler. The parallel between Amanda and Meghan also exposes the difference between sympathy earned and sympathy sought. Amanda's story is one of survival against impossible odds, of enduring prison and legal battles that nearly destroyed her life. Meghan's story, while marked by personal struggles, operates in a different sphere, one of fame, wealth, and choice. Critics argue that the comparison feels forced, that Meghan aligning herself with Amanda risks trivializing the real suffering Knox endured. Supporters, however, insist the parallel is valid, that both women faced misogynistic portrayals in the press, both were caricatured in ways that denied their humanity, and both struggled to speak for themselves in environments that thrived on silencing them. The attempted appearance at the premiere thrust this debate into the spotlight, and it was clear that not everyone saw the connection in the same light. The premiere itself, centered on Amanda Knox, symbolized the intersection of truth and spectacle. It asked the audience to question how media narratives are created and consumed, how stories are twisted for entertainment at the expense of real people's lives. Meghan, ironically, became a live example of that very theme. While the film played inside, the story dominating the outside was hers, and exclusion replayed, reframed, and consumed by millions. Just as Knox's humanity was overshadowed by the caricatures imposed upon her, Meghan's attempt to align herself with Knox was overshadowed by her rejection at the door. The parallel could not have been more brutal. There is another layer of irony here. Amanda Knox was once denied her freedom by a flawed system, forced to endure years behind bars. Meghan was denied something different but still symbolically powerful: entry, belonging, acceptance. Though the stakes were incomparable in scale, the optics created a symbolic link. Both women experienced barriers imposed upon them, barriers rooted not just in rules but in perceptions. Both became defined, in that moment, by what they were denied. And for Meghan, the denial at the premiere was particularly damaging because it was so public, so visible, and so ripe for interpretation. The parallel also raises questions about control. Amanda Knox had no control over how the world first perceived her. She was at the mercy of Italian courts and a sensationalist press. Meghan, by contrast, has spent much of her adult life trying to control her image, to curate her story carefully and deliberately. And yet, on that night, she found herself in a situation where control was stripped from her, where the narrative was dictated not by her actions but by the decision of a security guard and the interpretations of the watching media. In a strange way, this lack of control echoed Amanda's experience, albeit in a far less tragic form. Both women were forced into stories they did not choose, and both had to live with the consequences of those imposed narratives. Hollywood thrives on symbolism, and Meghan's exclusion was instantly folded into the symbolism of the Amanda Knox story. Inside, the film dissected how the press had turned Amanda into a spectacle. Outside, the press turned Meghan into one. The juxtaposition was almost theatrical: one woman's pain dramatized on screen, another woman's humiliation unfolding live on the red carpet. The premiere became not just a film event, but a cultural mirror, reflecting the ways in which women's stories are consumed, distorted, and weaponized. The Amanda Knox parallel also complicates Meghan's broader narrative. For years, she has attempted to frame herself as a figure of resilience, someone who endured cruelty and emerged stronger. Aligning with Amanda Knox could have strengthened that narrative, positioning her within a broader conversation about injustice. But instead, the denial made her appear not as a survivor, but as an outsider seeking relevance. The parallel was not lost, but it shifted. Instead of walking in solidarity with Amanda, she was left symbolically excluded from Amanda's story, and in that exclusion, critics found ammunition. They argued that Meghan's attempt to tie her struggles to Amanda's only highlighted the differences, exposing her desire to appropriate a story that was not hers. Supporters, however, seized on the parallel in a different way. They argued that the rejection itself was proof of how Meghan continues to face exclusion and judgment, just as Amanda once did. For them, the snub was not a humiliation but a demonstration of how society delights in shutting women out, particularly women who challenge the narratives imposed upon them. To these supporters, Meghan's exclusion at the premiere only reinforced the legitimacy of the parallel, showing that she too was trapped in a cycle of vilification. What is undeniable is that the Amanda Knox premiere became the perfect backdrop for Meghan's drama. The themes of the film, media cruelty, distorted truth, survival against judgment, were mirrored uncannily in what unfolded outside. It was as if reality had staged its own parallel performance, one that no director could have scripted. And for Meghan, the irony must have been devastating. She sought to align with a story of redemption, but became instead the subject of a story of exclusion. The Amanda Knox parallel will linger in public memory because it crystallized something essential about Meghan's journey. It showed both her ambition to be seen, to be included, to be part of cultural conversations, and the resistance she faces, the barriers that prevent her from claiming the space she desires. It also highlighted the precariousness of her public image, the way every attempt at control risks slipping into spectacle, the way every step toward inclusion risks becoming another moment of exclusion. In the end, the Amanda Knox parallel revealed the fragility of Meghan's place in the cultural imagination. She is, like Knox once was, a figure caught between competing narratives, defined as much by what others say about her as by what she says about herself. The difference, of course, is that Amanda Knox's redemption came through suffering that demanded sympathy. Meghan's story, however, exists in a realm of privilege, wealth, and celebrity, making her claim to parallel treatment both compelling and controversial. The premiere made that tension visible, and it is a tension that will continue to define her attempts at reinvention. Prince Harry's absence at the Amanda Knox premiere was as conspicuous as Meghan's attempted presence. When she stepped out of that car alone, dressed in an outfit clearly chosen to command attention, there was a noticeable gap beside her. The husband who had once been her constant companion at such high-profile events, the man whose very name tethered her to royal relevance, was nowhere to be seen. That absence was not just logistical, it was symbolic. And for many watching, it raised more questions than answers. The optics of partnership are crucial in celebrity culture, and for Meghan and Harry, those optics have long been their greatest asset. Together, they presented themselves as a modern, glamorous, and rebellious couple who had broken away from the strictures of monarchy to build a new life on their terms. They signed deals together, gave interviews together, appeared on stages together. Their brand was built on the idea of unity, of shared defiance in the face of an institution they claimed had sought to silence them. Yet here, at a moment when Meghan was most vulnerable to public judgment, Harry was absent. Why? That question lingered heavily in the aftermath of the incident. Some speculated that Harry had chosen not to attend because the premiere had no direct connection to them, making it inappropriate for him to appear. Others whispered that Harry himself may have been reluctant to be thrust into another media storm, preferring to avoid the glare of a red carpet that wasn't theirs to own. More cynical voices suggested that the absence was deliberate, a sign of distance in their marriage, a calculated choice to avoid being seen supporting a move that could backfire. Whatever the reason, the absence mattered. For Meghan, Harry's non-appearance meant that she bore the brunt of the humiliation alone. Had he been by her side, the denial at the rope would still have been shocking, but it might have been softened by the presence of her husband. Together, they could have played it off, turning rejection into a moment of solidarity. But without him, the rejection was hers alone, magnified and personalized. The image of Meghan standing at the rope, facing down security staff, contrasted starkly with the empty space where Harry might have stood. That image communicated isolation, a vulnerability that cut deeper than the denial itself. Harry's absence also reignited old debates about the couple's dynamic. From the very beginning, critics have accused Meghan of leading Harry away from his roots, of being the driving force in their decisions, while Harry followed. This narrative, though simplistic, has persisted, and his absence at the premiere seemed to confirm it in the eyes of those who doubted their partnership. Meghan, once again, was portrayed as the ambitious one, pushing boundaries, seeking relevance, while Harry stayed away. The symbolism was difficult to ignore. She advanced into Hollywood spaces. He hung back in silence. There is also the possibility that Harry's absence was strategic. Meghan's decision to attend may have been a gamble, a move designed to tie her narrative to the themes of the Amanda Knox film. If it worked, she would stand in the glow of renewed relevance. If it failed, the fallout would be hers alone. In that light, Harry's absence could be read as protective distancing, a way to shield himself from association with a potential scandal. But such distancing comes at a cost. For a couple whose brand has been built on unity, even the appearance of disconnection can erode public trust in the image they project. Observers could not help but recall past appearances where the couple presented a united front. Interviews like the one with Oprah, public speeches at charity events, glamorous appearances at award shows. These moments were defined by their togetherness. To see Meghan without Harry at such a charged event was jarring. It suggested, whether intentionally or not, that she was navigating this new phase of their lives on her own, without the royal buffer that Harry's presence provided. For many, it felt like watching the unraveling of the very narrative they had so carefully built together. Harry's absence also spoke to a deeper truth about their roles in Hollywood. While Meghan has leaned heavily into visibility, crafting an image centered on fashion, appearances, and branding, Harry has often seemed more reluctant. He is more comfortable speaking about causes, mental health, veterans, the Invictus Games, than attending red carpet premieres. Meghan's world is one of optics. Harry's world is one of advocacy. This division has always been there, but on the night of the Amanda Knox premiere, it became glaring. Meghan reached for Hollywood spotlight, while Harry remained out of frame, his silence louder than words. For Meghan, the absence must have cut deeply in another way. The humiliation of being denied entry is painful enough, but to endure it without her closest ally at her side turned the incident into something lonelier. When she turned from the velvet rope and walked back toward her car, the cameras captured not just a woman rejected, but a woman rejected alone. That image resonated powerfully because it contradicted the story Meghan and Harry have always told, that no matter what, they face the world together. On that night, the world saw something different. Speculation about what Harry was doing instead only added fuel to the fire. Was he at home, unaware of the humiliation unfolding in real time? Was he briefed but unwilling to intervene? Or was there a deeper fissure between them, one that made his absence not circumstantial but intentional? The lack of clarity left room for endless conjecture, and the media capitalized on it ruthlessly. Headlines didn't just focus on Meghan's exclusion. They highlighted Harry's non-appearance, weaving narratives of marital strain, disunity, and strategic distance. What is striking is how Harry's absence amplified the symbolism of the event. Without him, Meghan's rejection stood as a singular humiliation, unsoftened by the idea of shared struggle. Without him, the narrative shifted from a couple excluded to a woman excluded, from a shared challenge to an individual failure. The empty space beside her became its own form of commentary, a silent reminder that she walked into this storm alone. The irony is that Meghan and Harry's relationship has always been portrayed as a rebellion against exclusion. Together, they defied the monarchy, choosing independence over tradition. Together, they sought to redefine what it meant to be royal in the modern world. But on that night, Meghan faced exclusion without him, and the symbolism was devastating. The rebellion seemed fractured, the unity strained, and the world took notice. Harry's absence, in the end, was not just a logistical detail. It was a narrative force, one that reshaped the way Meghan's rejection was perceived. It turned what could have been a shared humiliation into a solitary one, deepening the sting and amplifying the spectacle. And for a couple whose power lies in their unity, the image of Meghan at the rope without Harry was more damaging than the denial itself.